What's going on? I'm back with another episode of Politicking and Demonstrating. Here to give y'all some more game. Hopefully, y'all will soak it up. I got my man Chauncey White.
What's up? What's up?
He does a lot dealing with the software. He had a magazine, Life Lessons. Brought this out a few years back. He gonna talk about that. We're gonna get into that a little bit. And you know, life lessons, I guess, man.
Mm-hmm.
That's just off the head. Life lessons. Let's go,
Right.
man. Let's talk about it.
Life
Uh,
lessons, baby.
you know, and what made you want to bring the magazine out? Like that's something that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is it's a old. Well, it's a few years old person who lived in the streets, and a lot of people say I'm from the streets. I lived there.
Right,
Okay. When
right,
I say I lived there, I'm talking about out the car.
right.
Don't know where you're gonna go. This place. There was 1 month I was in 9 different places. But you know what? When that was probably one of the most enlightening parts of my life, though, because life lessons. That's actually where I found most of my strength was when I was at that far down,
Mm,
and that's where I found my fortitude and my fight was when I was that far. So life lessons is really it. Well, it was, and I may bring it back out, but it really was about everyday people. And there's we get we had some celebrities in here, but it really wasn't about celebrities.
right.
It was about the average everyday people. They tell their stories, and it was really picturesque. I mean, this was when magazines was cool.
Yeah. Listen, listen.
You know what I
This
mean?
is this is a very, very, very well put together magazine. I mean, you got the
Thank you.
ads, you got real ads, BMW, Chevy. I'm just saying, it's a real magazine. It's
All
not
right.
something that you know, was just put together and just put out. So
How I Well, let me just explain what it is. So first of all, I created a software. It's an algorithmic software that this is real broad terms, okay?
mm,
That figures out how to reduce the most risk for making money. Period. All right. Now, from there, you've got to start understanding how money is made.
mm,
All right. So that's where we're going to start getting into a lineage. So when I first started, obviously, I grew up country boy, Osceola, Arkansas, Bible Belt. Didn't really know much. Parents moved us out to Virginia, and then after that, never finished education. But I managed to get that far with the banks because of one word: risk.
mm,
Risk management. So, what do I mean by that? You got to figure out ways where you can reduce your chances of not making it. All right.
mm,
So I had to be able to barter something else. I had to leverage something, right? So when I start realizing that in order to make money, it's all about wager, it's all about leveraging, right? So uh, when I got laid off, that's when I started my businesses. I ended up starting a number of different tech companies. Failure after failure after failure,
mm.
one after another. It just that's where I went through that whole cycle of you don't know where you're gonna stay, you don't know where you're gonna live, and all this other good stuff.
Yeah.
Years went on, and a lot of failure went on, and ultimately I started. I'm thinking the way out of that was through conventional business, so that's the reason I
Yeah.
never left it. So I started this, and I'm like, if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do something big, man. I'm gonna,
Yeah.
have the best quality and whatever. And what I found is that no matter how amazing this was, no matter how great it was, if I did not know how to calculate my chances for success,
Mm-hmm.
I was doomed for failure.
Yeah. It's not gonna, just come right away.
But
How you used to be a good musician.
it's because
It's a long story.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we're not gonna even get
If you don't use it, you're gonna lose it.
right, right.
But music is always in my heart. But when we're talking about money,
Mm-hmm.
the kind of money I want,
Right.
now I got to start weighing my odds
Yeah.
against the market
You're
or
not
against my competition.
basically what you saying is hey, I'm not gonna get what I want with that profession.
With this, because there's too many guys who can straight up kick my ass on the keys.
Right.
So why am I going to compete in this
Yeah.
market?
And
It's just
and that's exactly what I just
right,
said. You talented,
right.
you could play, but what are your
What are
chances
your
of
chances?
actually playing for a big pop singer, or
Right,
you know
right.
playing for
Knowledge, right?
Mm,
If not that I'm religious, but that's a good
right,
passage.
right.
So if you're lacking knowledge, no
Mm,
matter how good of a person you are, failure is common.
hmm
Man, I know I could spit these bars, I could do this, that, and the other. Great. Where are you located? Who's your market? All these risk variables, if you don't understand them, no matter
hmm
how good of a lyricist you are. Look, Blind Fury. You sure you know about that guy, right? Remember
Yeah,
the guy
I
106 in Park?
yeah, I've heard of them. Yeah.
Dude killed 106 in Park. How
Hmm
many millions is he collecting right now for his skill?
Right.
There is risk in that market,
hmm
no matter how great of a lyricist or whatever you are,
Especially with the music, man, because
especially with the music.
you really only it, but it depends on what level you're trying to be on, because you can
Right.
actually make money.
Depending on what you're trying to do. What
Yeah,
is it? What kind of life you want?
yeah. If you,
Right. Time and money.
yeah,
And in this one life we got, one thing we ain't got a whole lot of is time. Well, time, and most of us ain't got no money with it.
right,
And I want both.
right,
So I had to get smart. I had to get smart because it's like I got to figure out the game.
right, right.
The game ain't about work because now you're taking my time.
Mm,
Well, if I gotta get money, how can I get money without quote unquote working? That's where understanding how to reduce your chances for the most part of your life. You would have bought a house and the banks would have been happy.
hmm
The mortgage company would have been happy. The taxes would have been happy. But 40 of your waking hours was given to someone else.
right,
And that was the game I didn't want to play.
yeah,
So ultimately, when I let this go is when I start really starting to think about how could I get smarter and better about my decisions and
yeah.
making money.
And most of us fall into that pattern of working for somebody else, and punching that clock. Basically, you have some people that's doing it, but they got other hustles on the side trying to get up out of that. But most of the people are just gonna do it forever, and you gonna trip and fall and stumble and
Yeah.
fumble and all, and that's really what breaks people down. Them body shots, pop, 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 pop. Man, fuck that.
Right.
I'm finna go do something else. But if you stick with it and go through all that, and you got what it take, you're gonna get something out of it, man.
Right.
And that's the whole thing about it. The trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen overnight, man.
Mm-hmm.
So what you saying is very, very, very important. And just like getting into the tech in the game with you. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
not like it's a whole a slew of brothers and sisters that's in that game with you. So that makes it even more harder for people to come up in it, and for you to be successful in doing what you're doing. Hey man, you're a cold piece of work, Jack. So
Well, I
get into
appreciate it.
that, and
Well, yeah.
about that maneuvering,
Yeah.
and see, this is what y'all need to pay attention to, because when you get into these type of activities and avenues, hey man, you better know how to maneuver
Yeah.
with this.
And when I think of winning, I think of your abilities to have money and as much time as you can have. The biggest commodity is not how much paper you can throw, but how much time you can redeem with that paper.
Mm,
And a lot of times we get confused on thinking that the game is about having money. And money is the byproduct of how best your time is. Listen, Bernie Madoff is a billion. Well, I don't know if he's dead or not, but he was in jail.
mm,
Okay. Billionaire in jail. So it doesn't matter how much money you have if you're locked up mentally
mhm,
or if you're locked up with your time.
yeah,
So one of the things I had to get smart about was, okay, what is it that I want? I want time and I want money, right? So, well, what are my chances of that here where
Mm.
I'm at that where there was a job or a business or wherever I was? And so what I had to do was, and what I tell everybody who's trying to start a business, if that's what you're in, your first thing you need to do, because when people come to me and say, "Hey, I want you to invest in my company," my first thing is, "What's your risk analysis?" Huh? What's your risk and what are all the areas where this is going to fail? If you can't have that conversation, you're not ready. Things in reality. So now what you got going is you got all of these different variables that you got to meet.
Yeah.
And if you don't meet these things, it's just like having a job. If you got a job description, try not meeting those variables that will cause you to lose that job,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, the reason why a job is cool is because you don't have to take the risk that the owner of the company did.
Right.
Hey, listen, I don't want to do this 9 to 5 thing no more. I'm gonna start my company.
Yeah.
And that's when, lie to you not, shit went so far downhill. And I mean, but that was the beginning of wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
because it was like I asked the universe, I asked God to take me away from this. So now it said, okay, cool, I'm gonna take you away from it. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you a whole new side of this track.
Right.
You about to lose it all. And let's see how you cope.
Mm.
You about to, your friends, oh, they all about to talk about you.
Right.
So whatever you thought you had with that, that's out.
Mm.
Okay. You're gonna lose your house, whatever money you thought you had.
Mm.
And
To the something. You know what I'm saying? It's listen, uh, she's undefeated. You know, the only thing you can do is do what you're supposed to do. And like I always say, stay righteous and keep your hands clean,
right.
you know, and mind your business and do what you're supposed to do. You know, because once you get a certain age, you know, you shouldn't be doing uh bogus activities anyway. You know, just doing stuff you're not supposed to be doing.
All right.
You know, be responsible. Hey, he's not saying because you have a job you a sucker,
No, not at all.
because you got to eat,
Right.
but um it becomes an issue when you crying about what you're doing every day and you want a lot of things in life but you're not willing to work for them.
Right.
That's what we talking to.
Right.
So, you know, if you can't get up and just, you know, go get those extras for yourself, because hey man, you still can have a job. Listen, man, ain't nothing wrong with having a job, because
Mm-mm.
you can get that insurance, you know, have your dental, your vision, with your with your medical, and still have your own business and have a nice business. It depends on how you want to
It
do it.
depends on what life you want.
Yeah,
And the only thing
yeah,
I'm trying to say is that there ain't no limit to the life you can have.
yeah. And the reason I said that, because you
Yeah.
know, some people do that.
Right.
You
We
know,
need it. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
listen,
Some
like
people really do that.
there are different, there are 4 markets
Yeah.
where you can make money. Most, but when we listen, I think it was Rockefeller that said this in 1906,
Mm.
and he went on to invest $1.3 billion in the U.S. education system. You know what he said? I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers.
Mm.
Rockefeller.
Work, 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 work,
Okay.
work, work.
So we already are in a system where we're being indoctrinated to work,
Mm.
right? And not think. There, I think it was Robert Kiyosaki that said, think and grow rich,
Mm-hmm.
not work and grow rich.
Yeah.
It comes in form of thought first. Well, the
Mm-hmm.
question is, what are you thinking about? What I'm here to tell you is that when you're thinking about money, your first thought will be, where are all the areas where I will fail? And then when you start thinking from that perspective, risk management is something that we're really not taught about.
Mm.
How's this gonna screw our wheels? Because the reality is that even if you said, I'm gonna leave my job and I'm gonna go start a magazine company, you have not only a higher chance at failure,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you stand to lose a lot more of your time and money.
Right.
So starting a business ain't necessarily the most wise idea either,
Mm-hmm.
if you understand the game.
Listen, man, if you're gonna start a business, you better make sure you can sell whatever you trying to.
You
You,
better
you,
you better be great at something.
you
You got to
know,
have
for real.
leverage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What's your angle? What's your leverage? It's like, and how does that translate in competition?
Hmm.
You ever heard of a, see, this is a market. They the capital market is, capital means money.
Hmm.
Market is the Thunderdome where all the people go to compete.
Mm.
A supermarket.
Right,
And I mean losing
right, right.
by the pound. The only question I could even form was
Mm.
why? No matter how, man, listen, we look, you saw it. We
Yep.
got, what was it? Neiman's and Marcus in here.
Hmm.
So it's like with all of that going on, how you lose it?
Hmm.
Why?
Hmm.
And when I started getting smart about that, that's when I started really studying capital markets, the whole point of our existence. How do we make money? Who controls it? Who educates us? And how do we escape the Planet of the Apes?
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? How do we escape this game? How do
Hmm.
we get our time and our money back? So that's where I started getting smart, and I started developing software and stuff like that.
Mm. Yeah, man. Developing the software. Um, I'm sure that's you know a very, very, very tactical job, and I'm sure the experiences. Sometimes it could be overwhelming.
Mm,
You know,
mm,
because I'm sure software is always changing.
I started saying, well, how in the world can I? Because I developed this stuff. So what are all? And then I started thinking about all the ways I was failing, and I'm like, man, that's just too much. Like, I couldn't overcome that, couldn't overcome that. And then there's time, there's competition, there's pricing, there's delivery, there's marketing, there's advertising, there's legal, there's accounting. Boop, 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 boop. For the kind of life I wanted, the risk here was way too high.
Mm.
And so I started getting smart and thinking about what markets actually lower my risk for money.
Mm.
So that's where we start going down the rabbit hole of understanding how capital works, capital markets. So before I start talking about the casino market, let's talk about the four major capital markets that's really not talked about, and how I ended up. Well, I've been in Vegas now for 3 years, particularly. So when this kind of folded, I came to Las Vegas for the first time in my life, and that was maybe about 7 years ago. Never knew anything about this city or what it did. I didn't even
Yeah.
understand what a casino was. All
Right.
right.
Right. Me neither. Cause
And
the only casino I had ever been to was the ones in Indiana, and I wasn't really in there trying to I was in there really in there with my mother and my auntie. Excuse me.
right.
That's who I was in there with, and they was doing their little thing, but I really.
I didn't realize that people were giving these people money and taking it back or getting $1 from them.
Mhm.
And I sat down at one of the games. My sister sat down. Now, I don't want you to think about this from because that's where it's been taught, casino. So when I saw the casino, I said, wait a minute, you put $1 there and then you got this back?
Mhm.
And he's like, yeah. I say, do you get to keep that? She said, yeah. I said, do you understand what you just did? She says, what? I say, you know how much money it cost me to develop this magazine?
Mm.
Thousands. How many networking parties I went to, how
Mm.
many hands I shook, all to fold.
Mm.
And I mean, before I sold the first copy, I was in $10,000.
Mm.
Here's what the banks don't tell you. They don't tell you as a business, as an entrepreneur, that you have a 70% chance of failure.
Mm.
They're not going to tell you, they're going to bring you in there with that 800 credit score and say, oh, well, that's great. But you know you have a 70% chance at losing your contract. So I'm like, wait a minute. Why is it that I just put $5 here,
Mm.
when I put 10 here before I sold the first $10 magazine. And I won 5 without risking 10.
Mm.
Now the thing is, they say, well, life is everything's a gamble. Well, if it's all a gamble, why are we not being taught that it is? Why are we not being taught that everything comes with risk and liability? Because the house wins every time we are educated. Because had I been educated as an entrepreneur, and here's what the bankers do, bro. They are really, I think we said it earlier, Rockefeller said 1906, I think it was, go look it up. We want a nation of workers, not a nation of thinkers. If you your job interview, they wrote on the top of it slave contract,
Mhm.
would you be apropos to go take that job? Would you say, man, this is a job I want? They got the word slave contract on top. No, but they do a good job at making sure that they define certain words for certain markets. So they
Mhm.
call people in that market employees. Now,
Yeah.
an entrepreneur, meanwhile, you got to go take out $60,000 of a loan, and that's called an education, right?
Mm.
And that when they give you that paper, you know what they don't say? This is going to guarantee you $100,000 in and out of inflation. Right now, inflation is almost 10%. If you get an increase on your job, it'd be no more than 3.
Right. Right.
But you just wagered $60,000 called an education before you got the job.
Yeah.
The same way I gave these jokers $10,000 out of me taking the risk of an entrepreneur, I'm going to gamble based on his risk.
Mm.
I'm going to see I'm going to invest in your company. And because you managed to put up all the money and you really did a good job at competition and competing and marketing, you answered all the risk columns the best. So I'm going to put my money on you.
Mm.
But there are variables, but that doesn't mean I'm guaranteed to win on that stock trade
Right.
because 90% of Forex traders fail.
Mm.
As good as that sounds, and all these new upstart gurus that want to tell everybody to go invest in the market, ask them this question: how do you calculate futures risk? Do you know what those variables are? Are they outlined in these portfolios, or
Mm.
only thing are you going by is historical data? Warren Buffett said, to overcome, and if I know what these variables are, I know what the potential output for winning is.
Mm.
So let's talk about the casino market, right? The casinos are banks.
Mm.
They're not casinos.
Right.
They're more liquid than banks.
Okay.
Okay. This market did 13.6 billion last year at the height of a pandemic.
Mm.
The banking industry in Nevada didn't see those type of profits.
Mm-hmm.
There's 4 pillars of capitalism: the job market, entrepreneur market, investment market, and the casino market. Now, there's definitions inside of all of these.
Mm.
The job market calls people who play exchange their time for money, in that market employees, right?
Mm.
Because there is a wager that you're going to have to make with your time and your skills. So
Right.
how do you hedge that wager? You get education. How much does it cost? You
Yeah.
making a bet. They're not going to tell you that though,
Yeah.
because
Because the education, you gonna pay for education.
you're going to pay for it. Banks
Mm.
at interest. Student loan debt is at 2.1 trillion.
Mm.
You know how this economy works? It works based on debt. If people ain't in debt, this economy doesn't. Now that's a whole deeper subject, but
Yeah.
that's kind of how I got into the software. So it's understanding these markets. So the entrepreneur market, the same way, is that the banks won't tell us that you're gambling.
Mm.
They'll call you entrepreneurs. They'll say, good job, you're an entrepreneur, the entrepreneurial spirit. But they're not going to tell you have an inherent 70% chance of
Yeah.
losing over 10 years, not 10 days. See that? Get that? See, we're talking about time over 10 years. So it will float you for protection for the what's it called?
The
Protection.
the,
Complexion for the protection.
Right.
So I don't have that. I don't have the money because a lot of us, we don't come from money.
Yeah.
And even if we got the credit, it's still a tie. So what's next? The investment market, right? So that's what I was thinking when I saw what happened at the casino, it made me go back to the investment market because I saw how fast
Mm.
money changed
Yeah, yeah.
without the risk, without the inherent upfront liability. In order for me to sell this first magazine, I had a business license, $75. I got to go get this, that's $100. I got to open up the building, now that's $2,500 down.
Yeah.
On and on and on and on. Not even a first dollar made before I've hedged all this time and money with an inherent risk of 70%.
Just steady spending money,
And you
money,
steady
spending
spending. You steady spending. You steady spending. So what investors do, they go to the investment market and say, well, I ain't gonna take this risk.
Right, right.
I'm gonna bet on them because I'm smarter than that. I'm gonna just
Right.
let y'all handle that. And the people who end up doing well are the major corporations, mom and pop, small business. Even if you survive, you end up kind of owning a job.
Yeah.
You know, so I had to get a little bit more brighter about it, and then ultimately, I started. I went to saw that happen in Vegas. I saw how quick that money changed, and then I thought about the stock market because in the stock market it moves the same kind of way. The only difference is that there were still risk variables that you like. 50% of crypto crashed a couple weeks ago.
Right.
I told my guys, and I got clients all over the world: New Zealand, Austria,
Yeah.
Singapore, China, that I've educated on what I'm doing. And I had one guy who had invested $25,000 in crypto about a month ago.
Mm.
And I was trying to educate him. I'm like, dude, do you know how to calculate risk? You're just doing it because it's a fad, right? So he put 25,000, crypto went down 50%, and it's going to continue to crash. Right now, you could expect this market to go for all markets to go further and further down, except for this one market, and that's the casino market. It's being presented differently to you because, like I said, if they presented the job market saying up at the top slave contract, you wouldn't do it.
Right, right.
But you're giving them 40 hours of your life every week.
80 hours every 2 weeks.
80 hours every 2.
And y'all be doing OT. I'm not doing no overtime.
You know, and it's like you do
Sterling,
what you
do you want to come in and do some overtime? Hell no.
Right. So that's the game that they run in. But if we knew that, we probably would think different, right?
Yeah.
So I created because I will not call you a slave for being an employee. Your employer won't say that either. Because if you ever thought of yourself as that, you might not want to be there. You might start thinking like me.
Right.
So we use terms to define where you are to keep you there.
Mm-hmm.
Like they gave the term to black people, Democrat. Keep you at a job. Keep you working, minimum wage. Why? Because that means you go in terms of capital market. If there is money being exchanged, at what level of risk? Again, this was 10,000 before the first sold. And I still had a 70% chance of losing. I could have took that same 10. Now, I don't get it. Now, I'm going to explain this. You could have took the same 10 and had a 48% chance on a game in an instant and still would have had 10 years to recover if you lost. But if you start a business and you have a 70% inherent chance of losing, I got you for 10 years, I got you for interest, and you still lost. And guess who won? The house did.
3 strikes you out.
So, okay. So in the investment market, I said, well, let me create a software because at least I could recognize what companies are winning, right? So if my risk of losing is going to be based on how well these companies do. Well, there's this thing called inside trading. There's this thing called competition. There's this thing called legalities, and there's this thing called what politician did you shake hands with, or what company did you do this with, or what kind of backroom deal did you do that caused that stock to dip. And now next thing you know,
if you got in when you're supposed to got in and got out, it was sweet.
Right.
But they tricked y'all, man, and they got a whole bunch of y'all tied up. Hey, man, don't look at me, man. I can tell you to do it, Jack. You know, you should have minded your business. And that's what I was telling Mike as far as, especially when you're doing stocks and with whatever you're doing, make sure you do it right.
Right.
You know, and that's really all that he's saying. Make sure whatever you're doing or whatever you're getting into,
you understand it.
Yeah. And a lot of us, we get into things and we half understand.
We're just going by what we think, what we feel, the hype. what we've been educated to do, because I can't tell you when. All right, so let me just kind of bring you back up. So because this is such a taboo thing to even talk about, the fact that a professional, I'm not I'm a I come from the banking world. I come
Mm-hmm.
from business and all these other things. So what I'm saying is stock market and the things that I could not control, I had an issue with. And it's like, well, I couldn't control whether 50 I was going to lose 50% in crypto. I couldn't control S&P 500. And even though you invest in certain things, now you got this thing going up,
Yep.
going down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And ain't all of that is nothing but a wager. Ain't nothing but what these brokers are doing on Wall Street are betting. They're doing the exact same thing people do here. They make bets. However, these bets are based on some risk calculation, but a lot of times speculation, because it's all about a game. Okay, because a game is where you compete, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if so, we're all playing games. Whether you're on a job market, you're in competition, you're in a game. You're competing for money, because if you don't fulfill risk obligations called a job description, you lose the bet of your salary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Same thing in business. But we are not taught, we don't understand that capitalism is nothing but a huge casino.
Mm-hmm.
So, what the casinos do to is such a joke at what they've done
Mm-hmm.
and how they actually go about managing or getting people or winning people to this market. What they do is, we're good.
Mm-hmm.
What they do is that they take something so simple and make it so easy.
Mm-hmm.
But because you behave in a nature, or you've been taught to behave or not taught to understand how money and time works. For example, I'll give you an example. One of my friends, he works, I don't want to say he works at Chrysler. He makes about $1,500 a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was out here a few weeks ago. He made $1,000 in 30 minutes. And you know what he did? He stayed.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't take his money.
Mm-hmm.
If I do what I just did for another 30 minutes, the same result happens.
Yeah.
That's not how this market works.
Mm-hmm.
The only way this market survives, this is pure game. The only way the casino market survives is if you stay.
Right.
If everyone in this market, in this casino market,
Mm-hmm.
if you were up even a dollar, if you took your money,
Mm-hmm.
the casino market crashes.
Yeah.
This is the only market that behaves like that.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, and when we're talking about reduced risk of being able to win, because winning is money. So
Yeah.
it's like, again, I didn't win, even though this is great, you didn't win. Why
Mm-hmm.
not? Because the variables for winning are so enormous.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how the software went. I did a video and I put it on YouTube. It was called The Stock Market versus the Casino. And this is how I became kind of big in where I'm at.
Yeah.
And there was this idea called permutations that talks about, was the casino and the stock market the same?
Mm.
And the bankers, of course, will say it's not, but they'll have a difficult time trying to explain it.
Right.
The casino market actually is better than the stock market.
Yeah. Well, you want to know what, brother? We doing our thing, but we're gonna have to cut it
Oh,
short.
are we good?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're gonna have to cut it short. But I appreciate you, man.